I'm Tony Northrup, and this is a long-term review of our Sony a7S Mark III. We have been using this for like 9 months now. Hard to believe, time flies. We have been using a total of 3 different cameras with 3 different operators, and we've produced over 100 videos now. So we have a lot of hands-on experience. That means this is not a test. We don't have to create artificial situations in order to figure out how well something works. We decided that this was going to be our main on-the-go camera, and we have been using it ever since the release. We have mostly positive experiences. I still think it is the very best camera for YouTubers, vloggers, and any one-man crew. I'm going to tell you all about it. First, I want to plug our store. NORTHRUP.PHOTO has a huge spring sale going on right now. All of our Lightroom presets, work in Lightroom Classic and regular Lightroom, are 50% off. That includes my technical presets, which pull more dynamic range out of your images than are otherwise possible, and Chelsea's creative presets, which give you dramatic looks in just a couple of clicks. We also have 25% off amazing content like our art and science video training series, our portrait professionals video training series, so you can make money with your camera gear now that portraits and weddings are back in operation, and our Lightroom and Photoshop training. I am anticipating all the comments from the fanboys like, oh, you were clearly paid by Canon, you were clearly paid by Sony. We have never been paid by any camera or lens manufacturer, nor have we ever accepted free gear. Furthermore, we are not fanboys. We do not care about the feelings of billion-dollar multinational corporations. We care about the consumers. That's you. I want you to spend your money efficiently. I do not want you to save up for a long time and spend thousands of dollars on a piece of camera gear that doesn't work the way you expect it. If you've already bought something, I'm not here to coddle your feelings and make you feel good about it. I am here to help people either use the gear that they have properly or make educated buying choices. And this is going to be a little bit of both. Before you write that comment that starts with "real filmmakers don't," please check out this YouTubers versus filmmakers video at this link here so I can discuss the sorts of operating differences between YouTubers and filmmakers. And please give us YouTubers a little bit of respect, right? We're paying the bills, telling stories, teaching people, reviewing products. We're creators and our own bosses, and it's a really, really hard job. First, let's talk about the video quality out of these cameras. It has been amazing. Nobody has ever complained. In fact, we've gotten an amazing amount of feedback asking, what camera was this shot on? And that is the highest compliment a YouTube viewer can provide. The Sony GM lenses, particularly those released in the last year or two, have been just great. Our main go-to lens has been the GM 24 f1.4, though we've also borrowed recently the 35 f1.4 and the 50 f1.2. I've had to return those, but I kind of miss them, so I might be buying them really soon. The older GM lenses and the older G lenses, not that good. And even in 4K video, you'll notice that they're just not that sharp and just not that contrasty. So I kind of limit myself to the recently released lenses. This records at up to 4K at 120 frames per second. We typically record it at 4K at 60 frames per second. We have found that YouTube viewers appreciate the faster frame rate. I typically record at the 100 megabit 422 10-bit video codec. And that 422 10-bit part means I am recording more color information across the entire spectrum. And I have found that to be really useful, especially in situations that require heavy grading, like filming after dark, at the dusk, or when times when the auto exposure doesn't quite work out right, where I have to pull up the shadows or pull down the highlights. It ends up looking better than it did before. I also regularly use S-Log. Our cameraman Frank says now he just uses S-Log all the time, and I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to pull out S-Log when I actually need the extra dynamic range, because I hate the extra processing, and in some situations S-Log can actually reduce the video quality. So we differ a little bit there, but nonetheless, it's a really nice tool to have. I will say, after filming with the Canon R5's RAW video, I really wish this had RAW internal video. I understand I can pipe it out to a Ninja external recorder and get RAW video, but that's way more heavy lifting than I want to do. The 4K video has allowed us to do pretty deep crops, and we regularly will film in 4K and then crop down even 200% to 1080 in order to improve the composition of a framing in post, to level out off balance horizons, or just to do an in-camera jump cut that doesn't look as much like a jump cut. That's a really useful tool that allows us to get more done with a single camera. The 60 frames per second, besides providing a nice smooth lifelike frame rate, also allows us to slow video down by 50% and still have it remain smooth. We frequently do this when we don't have coverage. Like maybe we recorded B-roll of somebody taking a picture, but it needs to go over a voiceover and the voiceover ends up being too long. I can slow that footage down, still have it appear smooth, and retain coverage. So high megapixels, high frame rate give hacks like us the ability to produce better content, and means we can get more done without, say, a dedicated director of photography standing over everything, making sure that everything works. While the video quality is excellent, it is not quite as good as the Canon R6. In our side-by-side tests, the Canon R6, which has a higher megapixel sensor, produced sharper images and cleaner low light. It's just all around better video quality. However, the R6 has a lot of disadvantages, like it does not have unlimited recording time, and it does not have 2 card slots, and it does not have this microphone connector capability, all digital without any wires. So that's the reason we did not choose the R6 as our main video camera. Sensor dust continues to be a main problem and one of the biggest challenges with video quality. Sensor dust seems to be inevitable, and you'll see it in quite a few of our videos. We make a point of regularly cleaning our sensor, but we've never ever had to clean the sensor on our Canon video cameras. The battery life on this camera has been good enough. The battery tends to last for about an hour of shooting, and I can USB-C charge it when I need to. So in emergencies, I can hook it up to the charger in the car or to a portable battery charger and get a little bit more juice out of it. One of the biggest advantages of this camera over the Canon equivalents is that it has unlimited recording time. It does not stop after 30 minutes, and it does not seem to overheat. This is where a lot of people are going to say, but real filmmakers never film for more than 38 seconds. This is just so not true. You know, wedding videographers will frequently set up a camera in the corner and expect it to record throughout the entire ceremony, and they don't want it cutting off right before the I-dos. Documentary filmmakers will set up a B-roll camera and just let it run unmanned during an entire interview, and they expect the camera to still be filming when it's over. And YouTubers like myself will often get started in front of the camera and just keep going longer than we expect. And with a Canon camera, you can wrap up your interview, go back to the camera and find out it shut off at some point. And then you have to figure out when it shut off and redo that entire section. This has never been a problem with the Sony. It's one of the biggest advantages of the Sony platform. They don't have those artificial recording time limits. The autofocus on it has been amazing for filming people. It does a spectacular job of finding the eye and locking in, even with incredibly shallow depth of field like a 50mm f1.2. However, if you want to record something else with autofocus tracking, it is not very good at all. Specifically, our most common scenario is somebody is holding a camera in front of them, and usually I want the focus locked on the eye while they're talking, but then I'll switch focus to the camera. You can do this by touching the touch screen. However, it locks on for only a second sometimes, and then the little tracking sensor will wander off the camera onto the person's hand, or if it sees the eye, it'll just forget the thing it's supposed to be tracking and jump to the eye. So we have incredibly unreliable subject tracking when it's anything other than an eye. Even if I hold my finger on the screen trying to get it to focus somewhere, it'll still wander off. So I would like to see this subject tracking algorithm improved. The Canon cameras, this is like 100%. You touch the thing you want it to focus on, it will stay focused on that until that subject completely leaves the frame. It's just not as good on the Sonys right now. While the autofocus system works great with faces, the auto exposure system works great with everything except for faces. It's exactly the opposite. It has an intelligent autofocus system that will see faces and expose the face properly, and it does that well unless the face moves around. If the subject looks away to the side a little bit, the entire exposure will change. Scrubbing through a long person to camera piece like this, I will see the exposure just wildly going up and down when the lighting in the environment has not changed at all. Again, the comments are starting, real filmmakers always use manual exposure, but as somebody who is a one-man crew, often filming myself, I need to start the exposure while I'm right up against the camera and then take 5 steps back. And I expect the camera to be able to expose properly for my face. Or if the sun goes behind a cloud, I can't stop and adjust the exposure for that change in the environment. I need the camera to handle these things. Right now, it's doing a really bad job of it. I think the way I'm going to have to deal with this is by turning off the face metering. So it's using just general metering. The color and grading on this has been really good. A lot of people complain about the Sony colors aren't as good as blah, blah, blah. We have scientifically found that to be false. We did a blind poll with thousands of people, and in general, the Sony scored better than anybody else when you didn't know it was a Sony. As soon as we labeled the colors as Sony colors, it suddenly like fell to last place because people don't like Sony. And there is this notion that Sony has bad colors. I think that was true at one point, but Sony has long since solved this. And in fact, as we're grading Sony and Canon cameras side by side, the Sonys are usually a little bit better out of the box. But again, it's actually pretty easy to fix in post, and I don't have any complaints about any modern camera's color or grading capabilities. The controls on this are much better than any other Sony camera, starting with the fact that it has a flip screen. That means if I'm on a gimbal like this, I can flip it out to the side, or I can stand in front of it. If I'm filming somebody else and I want them to see how it's framed up, this is really important. So people know where they can kind of move their hands, what stuff is in the background. The on-camera talent needs to be able to see the screen. I can flip that forward. I can't do that with a Sony Alpha 1, for example. I'm using FV mode all the time now. I programmed 2 of the custom buttons to switch shutter and aperture between manual and automatic. And that way I don't have to worry about switching between manual, aperture, shutter priority. I simply press those 2 custom buttons when I want to manually set a specific value for one of those things. And then when I need to adjust the exposure compensation, I use the dial here. But look what happens when I go to adjust the exposure compensation. Even on this gimbal now, the whole camera is going to shake. This is totally unacceptable, but adjusting the exposure compensation, the shutter speed, the aperture, while recording a segment without interrupting the on-camera talent, that's actually really important for the type of filming that we do. For example, I might pan from a person's face down to dark camera that they're holding. That might require an adjustment to the exposure compensation in order to properly expose the dark camera. If I do that, the entire shot shakes. On a Canon camera, I can simply touch the screen and adjust the exposure or any of the settings up or down. It's shocking that I cannot do that on a Sony camera. Another simple but important thing I can't do is scrub through the footage on a Sony camera. After I film a segment, I need to make sure that it looks okay and sounds okay. And that involves looking at the front, the middle, and the back end of that piece of footage. And right now you're limited to very small, difficult to use VCR style fast forward, rewind, pause controls. On a Canon camera, I can just drag my finger and scrub to the end, and it makes things go much faster. What I really need is the ability to scrub and the ability to see a waveform of the audio so that I know that the entire clip recorded okay and I do not need to re-record it. A minor annoyance is that the port covers on the a7S III are completely unlabeled. This comes up when I suddenly need to attach a field recorder to the HDMI port and I don't remember exactly where it is. Or if I'm using an analog microphone or headphones. None of these things are labeled and I always forget. I know you're super genius and you remember where every hidden thing is, like you're playing a game of concentration. But me, I have to flip everyone open every time. And it occurs to me, the Canon cameras and most manufacturers just label what's on the ports on the outside. And I could just take a white marker and probably label it myself. So maybe in the next revision, you can label your rubber covers just to make life a little bit easier. One of the long-standing criticisms of Sony cameras has been a lack of weatherproofing. This has proved to not be a problem. Multiple times we have been forced to record in rain and the cameras have gotten very wet and they have been absolutely fine, no problems at all. There seems to be sufficient weatherproofing for the types of things that we do. Let me talk about the flip screen here. First, it's a flip screen. Great, we need that for the reasons I discussed previously. However, it is practically invisible in sunlight. These screens need to be far brighter, far brighter. It is a specialized video camera to be used outside, and there's just no reason that it should be as weak as it is. Also, the design of it means that I can't flip it easily when I have a headphone jack in there, and I should always be using a headphone jack. And when I flip it forward, the headphone jack is right in front of the screen. The audio experience has been great. The Sony microphones connect through the hot shoe without a separate cable and without separate batteries. Over the last decade of filming multiple videos per week, we've probably had half a dozen times where the microphone cable became disconnected or the microphone batteries ran out partway through a shoot, meaning that the entire shoot had to be scrapped. This prevents those things from happening. So it's not happening to us like every day or every week, but it does happen occasionally, and it's nice to have just one less thing to worry about. I don't know of any other camera manufacturer that offers this sort of system, especially with so many different microphones. You can see we have two different configurations. This is a very nice digital shotgun mic with a dead cat on it, and that's kind of what I prefer to use. The sound is actually better quality than the lav mics when I'm fairly close to the camera. And this is a dual lav system that records the two channels to separate audio channels, left and right stereo, that I split out into mono and post-processing. And that means when both Chelsea and I are on camera, we don't have to pull in separate audio files. Everything is recorded in the video file, and it makes editing for us very, very easy. While the microphone connections are pretty sophisticated, the headphone monitoring to make sure you get good sound is still just a plain old headphone jack. It's remarkable to me that they have not figured out a way to wirelessly transmit to headphones. Hell, sell me some dedicated Sony headphones that use some proprietary wireless tech to allow me to monitor sound in real time without this cable. This cable is a pain. My go-to headphones have been the Apple Air Pro Max, I don't know what they're called, but they have great sound cancellation. So I can put these on and listen to the on-camera talent while mostly killing the outside sound. And that helps me in noisy environments separate out the sound that I'm hearing in the real world versus the sound that's actually coming through the mic. So I can do things like pick up rustling or wind that's actually hitting the mic versus just this wind that's hitting my ears. I wish I could do this without needing this dumb cable. This camera has sensor stabilization, and it's incredibly useful for evening out shots, but it's not nearly as good as the Canon stabilization. You can walk with the Canon R6 or R5, and it's almost like it's on a gimbal. With the Sony, it's just very shaky. So this means I have to carry this big old gimbal around in order to smooth out the shots just to get to like the Canon level of quality without a gimbal. If Canon were to give me a camera that had the like dual card slots, unlimited recording, microphone through the hot shoe, with the Canon stabilization, I would switch in a second. Like, it's a pretty big deal. But for me right now, I'm willing to make this trade-off of carrying this big rig around just to smooth out the walking shots. This camera records memory to 2 card slots. It supports both SD cards and CF Express Type A in the same slot. I have been using CF Express Type A, but the SD cards work just fine. And any new filmmaker, I would just say, get the SD cards. They're far cheaper. They're available in bigger capacities, and there's really no functional difference for you. How important is it to record to 2 card slots? In the last 6 months of probably 100 videos, we've had 2 corrupted files, not failed cards, but individual corrupted files where I pulled them in, they wouldn't play, so I just pulled out the backup card and pulled out those same files. This has happened to us probably 30 times in the last decade. It happens on a regular basis. And I get a lot of people saying, you're using cheap cards. No. All of this was with the Sony tough cards, like the most expensive SD cards you can buy. I get people saying, Nikon and Canon don't have card failures, it's only Sony. That's not true. We've had plenty of card failures on just about every type of camera, including Canon and Nikon. We did a massive poll of more than 4,000 photographers, and we found no correlation between the number of failures and the brand of card being used, the format, SD, CF Express, or the brand of camera being used. The only correlation we found was the more pictures and video you take, the more card failures you have. And right now we have created about 110 terabytes of content. So if you're looking at your 2 terabyte drive and you're saying you've never had a failure, maybe that's because we've created 50 times more content than you. We're likely to have far more failures. Over time, everybody is going to have a failure, right? If you haven't had one yet, it's luck. So you don't have to wear a seatbelt. If you've never been in an accident, you might think it might never happen. It might not. You could be that lucky. Or it could happen, and it's a better safe than sorry type situation. In those times when we have lost a card and we're not using 2 card slots, it has cost us a lot of money. Sometimes we cannot refilm. Sometimes we have to spend many hours going back and trying to create coverage through B-roll and voiceovers. Sometimes we have to go back to a location, pull people back together, redo sometimes more than an hour of recording. It's really nice to have that backup. Here is my wish list for the Sony a7S III for a firmware update. Sony, you can give this to me in software. First of all, give me a better way to override IAF. I love that you lock onto the eye, but sometimes I need to focus on what's in the hands, make it not switch away, and improve that tracking. I also want the face auto exposure to work a little bit better. If somebody turns their face away a little bit, don't wildly change the exposure. Cover the sensor when I take the lens off, dust sucks. Give me touch controls. I really need to be able to change settings without shaking the whole camera. Let me scrub through footage I've captured so I can make sure that I don't need to reshoot it. Give me a feature that I call depth of field priority, where if something moves closer to the camera, you shut the aperture down so that I have consistent depth of field even as the subject distance changes. This is why sometimes when I hold the camera up, the depth of field is too shallow. The depth of field was fine when it's on my face, but depth of field, it gets more shallow as the magnification increases. Allow me to counteract this natural effect of optics by smoothly shutting down the aperture as you pull focus closer. And finally, I could really use a hand monitoring sound. If the sound shuts off, let me know about it. Sony has these amazing algorithms that can track the eye of a seagull from 100 yards away, but the microphone completely shuts off in the middle of a recording and it does nothing. It just keeps going like it doesn't hear it. Like, if something goes wrong, flash red. Like, tell me, you can stop recording now, okay? I don't want to keep recording when there's no sound. I would also love it if there's a hair that gets caught on the microphone. This happens with Chelsea. She has long hair. If there's rustles, wind that hits the microphone directly, like, tell me about it while it's recording, so maybe I notice it and stop. But also, while I'm scrubbing through footage, maybe mark those locations in the video file so that I can go back and listen to them and see whether it's acceptable or whether I need to re-record. Help me out. I'm a one-man crew sometimes. Finally, head to NORTHRUP.PHOTO and check out our spring sale. 25% off everything, including the best-selling Stunning Digital Photography, literally award-winning. We have books on Lightroom and Photoshop to help you with your post-processing, and then video training series like The Art and Science of Photography and our portrait training series that will actually help you make money. If you have follow-up questions about the A7S Mark III, write a comment down below and hopefully I'll reply. If you have an A7S III and you've used it, let me know your own thoughts, both positive and negative. I hope this video has helped. Don't forget to subscribe to see our upcoming review of the Sony FX3 one way or another, as well as our tutorial on this camera for both stills and video. Thanks and bye.